Welcome to the Tech Log, your weekly log entry at the intersection of technology and business. Short episodes, real conversations. Let's get underway. In some of our last episodes, we have spent a lot of time talking about the magic of AI and what happens when the barrier to building software effectively disappears. Coding has become a cheaper resource than ever before, and we've been celebrating the speed, the accessibility, the vibe coding, the AI accelerated development, all of it. But we have seen a bandwagon trend happening here in the past few months. We are seeing people toss agents at everything. If a system needs to pull data, run an analysis, maybe even talk to an API, the immediate answer seems to go to an agent. Or let's just build an agent to handle that. Lisa had found a wonderful creator on Instagram called Rollins.io. If you haven't given him a listen, it's worth scrolling through some of his shorts. But he had made a post this week that said, don't use an agent if code works. If you have a deterministic solution, just use code. We know how to do code. Of course, he's coming at this with a programmer mindset. And we even discussed a few episodes ago how cheap code is getting, and the barrier of entry is nearly gone to write code. But that doesn't mean that there's still not an agent trap happening. And why are we replacing perfectly good, predictable code with potentially expensive, token-wasting AI loops? We're going to talk a little bit more about that today with Jeff and Lisa. Do you think you are seeing a trend of pushing work into agentic work for the sake of an agent doing it? Or do you think this is maybe a trend people are talking about but not actually pursuing?
I haven't seen, I think I've heard about this happening. I haven't necessarily witnessed it happening. I think a lot of us are using AI in ways that are still very experimental and, figuring out the art of what's possible. And so until we come up with processes that truly are repetitive, where there's not a lot of exceptions and outliers, using AI and using agentic workflows to do those things still make the most sense. But as things come out that are truly repetitive, then it will make sense to just build code, develop solutions to be able to handle those repetitive tasks. I agree with Mike. And by the way, Jeff and I know Mike from back when we had the co-working space here in Virginia Beach. Mike was one of our early members of the co-working space, and yes, a very sharp, very talented developer. So definitely go follow him on Instagram. He's been putting a lot of really fantastic AI content for developers over the last several months. I think the agents really work when there are exceptions, right? And anybody that's worked on a technology project or even just a process improvement project before, that you can either build towards the perfect path, right? The 80% of the problems or the inputs are going to follow this workflow through to the output. Or you can build to the exceptions, or the exceptions are going to be a problem. I feel like the agentic workflows and the agents are really going to be able to help with the exceptions. Can we say, hey, this exception has occurred. Let's kick it out of this traditional automation, hand it over to an agent that can perform some decision making or normalize whatever it is about the situation that's created an exception, escalate it to a human being if we need to, and then get it back into the original process to finish what it started. That's where I think in the long term, the agents are going to be able to handle much better than code.
Completely agree. Jeff, do you have any thoughts about the rise of agentic workflow right now in that trend?
Back when I was at Amazon, there was a fundamental system that we had in place that was basically you could automate something at the point that humans could automate it. And so there was, it still exists, I believe. It's called the Mechanical Turk. And so if there was certain things that were repetitive tasks, we then took those repetitive tasks and sent them to the Mechanical Turk. And it was actually humans doing all that work. And they were, I believe they were called HITs, Human Intelligence Tasks. And so over time, you say, okay, now we've proved this out. Now we can apply code to it. And this was not agentic. This was like 15 years ago. So wasn't agentic, wasn't anything but building a bunch of code to be able to do those repetitive processes over and over, whether it was scraping prices or looking at competitors' sites, whatever it was. And so I think that that's applicable today in the sense that you don't need to jump right to an agent. And Lisa and I talk about this all the time. Organizations always want to throw technology, the latest, greatest new tool at something. And right now, that's AI and agentic things, but they don't even know what their business processes are, or they haven't already even looked to see what the inefficiencies are. And so jumping from somebody who has business acumen and understands the inputs and outputs of the business doesn't make sense to throw an agent at it, because the agent isn't going to understand the context of the business without being given full information. So that's how I think of it. But I don't have a problem using agents.
I almost feel like the agents can be the mechanical Turk now in some of these automations, right? Hey, we think we can automate this. We don't know how we're going to automate it, but let's hand it off to an agent for now and see if it works. And then see what breaks, see what's not working, tweak it, make it better. And then once you've used it for 2 or 3 weeks or however long you need to prove it out, to go, this is what we actually want it to do, then you can go write code and automate it. And it becomes a lot easier because you have all your requirements and you know what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm. I think a term I have been hearing a lot, whether it's at in-person events, and you have to think a lot of the events I'm going to are not speaking to developers and speaking to business owners, people who are just tech savvy enough to probably break something, is use an agent as your intern. And I think if you use that term, when I think of handing something off to an intern, it's probably something fairly repeatable, low level, and there's probably not a lot of decision making in that task. At least I think that. And so to me, a lot of the tasks that I have been looking at that I was having agents do, I didn't need an agent to do those. Those could be scripts or even just workflows that I could build, and I have been building because I didn't need an agent to do it. I was wasting tokens. And so I think that thought process has been helpful for me, somebody who's probably not even using an agent to its full extent, right? I'm not building software with an agent right now. Was to reevaluate what exactly was I even having an agent do? Was I throwing the wrong problems at agents or placing agents in the wrong work situations? I think there are 2 ways to look at agent workflows right now, agentic workflows. There's a very optimistic view. I think, Lisa, you were touching on this a bit. They're self-healing, right? They're self-learning. They're hyper-flexible systems that can be built to those outlier situations, which is a wonderful benefit of agentic workflows. And then I think I'm seeing a bit of a pessimistic view as well, that there can be a lazier approach, which I hate using that term because I don't think that is the case at all, but that they can be unpredictable as well, or over-engineered, overkill. Do you think we're moving away from an environment where we can even use original or kind of OG or proper code? Or do you think there's still a time and place for good old code?
So I think that good old code and code generated by AI are the same thing. Ultimately, it's one of them has full access to every single piece of documentation and every single Stack Overflow and every single problem that anybody's ever had, and can make those decisions. And then they can even test what they did. And I think there's a lot of things where, and you say, oh, could you hand this over? The commodity-based work, I think you could delegate any of that over to an agent as aggressively as possible. And whether that's summarizing a document, summarizing a podcast for you, drafting emails, extracting data, going and finding data on the internet, formatting your code so it looks nice, any unit test, documenting code, resizing or reformatting images. I mean, the amount of time I used to take to take a JPEG and get it into the right aspect ratio and get it into the correct format to use, like a WebP. Now I just say, convert all these. I mean, a lot of people are using it for meeting summaries. So I think all of those things it doesn't matter. You're not there's hardly any risk in doing those. And I say drafting emails. I'm not saying send the emails. You still should proofread it, and you should make sure that it's accurate and represents what your thoughts are. But it's a huge time saver.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, remember, it's predictive in what it's doing. Code is very predictable. If you give it the requirements and you give it the couple of times we've talked about vibe coding in the past, and I think we've talked about it in a light where we've said, if you just log into Replit and say, build me an app to do da da da, you're leaving too much up in the air for the AI to choose what to do and what direction to go. If you go in and you say, this is the database I want to use, these are the languages I want you to code in, and then you give it really detailed requirements, the code that you're going to get is going to be higher quality code, faster than any human being could possibly write at this point, and ever will be able to again, because there's nothing really to predict, right? You're solving problems that have been solved and documented, over the years, millions of times now. And so with the right instruction, I think that is a lot easier for AI to get right on the first try or the second try or even the third try, then, and then you're iterating on that. Whereas if you are having it respond to an email without a lot of context, or you're having it write something for you without a lot of context, that's where you get those quote unquote hallucinations. I have found that if I have it draft an email or something for me, but I give it a bunch of really detailed notes before I ask it, it's very good at summarizing when it doesn't need to make anything up. I definitely think that, going back to your original question, there are definitely places throughout every business and every workflow process where code is the answer and will continue to be the answer, because you want a repetitive, predictable outcome. And you don't need this like ambiguity and decision making, and it might be a little bit different or this or that, right? Like, it's not, a lot of things are very repetitive, and you're just going to write code to be able to automate those things. And if you need a UI, you need, a place for humans to interact consistently, you're still going to write code to create those interfaces for people to interact.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, you were just talking about your emails. Do you have an agent doing those for you right now?
No, not really. I mean, I am still a very quick writer. I know what I want to say, and I'm a good writer. So I have no problem, composing an email, drafting an email. Now, if I have to write a longer email, so for example, this morning I wrote a longer email to our team. I had written a whole bunch of notes. I had an outline that was, probably about a page worth of notes that I wanted to communicate to the team. I did not want to go retype all that in the format of an email. So I did give that to ChatGPT, and I said, I'm sending this email to my team. Can you put this in a format for an email? And then I pasted that into Gmail, and I went through and, I took 5 minutes to clean it up and say, happy 4th of July, and end it with hope everyone has a good long weekend or whatever. I personalized it. I didn't want to have to rewrite my notes 2 times. So am I using it to respond to emails? Not necessarily. Now, I might be, if somebody's asking me a question about a contract or a project or something, I might give the contract to ChatGPT and say, can you tell me where in the contract all the languages I need to refer back to answer this email?
Mm-hmm. But you're just using AI for those responses, right? You're not having an agent.
I'm not automating that at this point. The most automation I'm doing on my emails is still just creating rules in Gmail to automatically delete stuff and get it out of my face. Which I don't need an agent for that. I've been doing that for years.
That leads me into our next question, is cost of maintenance. Does it cost more to have agents doing these things versus building traditional code? What are your thoughts on the cost and the maintenance of this type of work?
So I'm using one of Lisa's examples, but she and I have talked about this over, the past 10, 11 years of, we really want something done. And then we go to the development team and they're like, oh, that's going to take 6 months. And you're like, well, I don't want 6 months. I want it now. And, and developers, I love developers. They're also expensive, and they need to take naps and go and eat and go to the bathroom and tell everybody what they did over the weekend and all those kind of things that happen in a workplace. And the agents, I actually have them take a coffee break. They go into their break room and they actually talk about things that they're researching that they then all judge each other and report back to me. But they get things done really quickly. We don't have any legal issues with them saying or tickling other employees or anything like that. And they're really effective. And so if you were to look at it and say, I'm spending $1,000 on tokens in a month, even a $10,000 a month programmer would not be able to crank out as much high quality code and deliver as many PRs as these can do. And usually the code just works. So
situation you just explained, is there still a need for a traditional developer?
I think you need somebody who understands what code is. I think you need somebody who understands how to review the PR or review somebody's inputs or their work items and understands logic and business logic and what the success criteria and the outcomes are. But a lot of times that's not what a programmer is. You tell them, I want you to, on this e-commerce site, implement 2 types of shipping, one as ground and one as air. And they'll do that, and they'll do it literally, but they might not even understand what ground and what air are, and so they
Jeff's
just
about to tell a story about human hallucinations, because way, way, way long ago, before AI, there was a team of developers that were tasked with implementing 2 types of shipping, air and ground. And without any instruction to do so, they defined air and ground as, this is the type of shipping where the box travels on a road, and this is the type of shipping where the box travels in the clouds.
But I think it was more like air was where the box floats freely above the atmosphere, and ground was where the box remains in contact with the crust of the earth.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, so
like hallucinations from it's like lack of information. It's that could have been avoided if you were like, you don't need to define ground and air, by the way. We don't need notes about what that means printed on every order.
Yeah, well, no, it was a tooltip. So when you moused over it, when you were trying to decide,
like a help text.
Yeah, it was help text.
I feel like we should implement that at Fathom just to see if anyone catches on when they ask
examples like that. When people complain about AI hallucinating, I'm like, but you don't understand. That's actually not new. You just feel overwhelmed by it now because you're interacting with a software developer, and I'm sorry if software developers are offended by that. I think software developers are very talented, and they're very technology minded, and their brains work in a very structured way. And I have found, in general, not everyone, but generally, they do not deal very well with ambiguity unless they are in specifically a strategic role, and that's what they want to do, is design and build and architect solutions. But a lot of developers that like to be heads down just writing code, they're like, give me the requirements, I'm going to build it, I'm going to ship it, and then you give me the next requirement, I'm going to build it and ship it. And there are a lot of developers that really, really love working that way. And those are the ones where every once in a while they're like, but I have a tooltip here, I need to put something in it. And that's what happens,
I feel like probably anyone who's listening to this who's a founder or a small business owner who has done any kind of offshore has a similar experience, right? When you employ an offshore team, whether you're employing developers or VAs, there's that inability to not take things so literally sometimes and understand the context and kind of the holistic structure that the requester is asking of the code to do.
I mean, the amount of Salesforce implementations I've seen where I come in and there's so many fields. We don't understand why there's so many fields, and the developers have added all these custom fields and the client has no idea why. And then, 2 weeks later, it comes out, here's the data migration files. They did a full export from an old system, came out with, they had 5 fields that had data in it, but the Excel spreadsheet came out, had 167 rows of blank columns and system information. You gave them a list of 137 fields. They created them, told them to create them. Now, a human being would now you could have said, don't create any fields for any columns that don't have any data, and then that wouldn't have happened. But, in my mind, that's the same type of hallucination that could happen with AI if you don't tell it what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, what that comes back to again is business knowledge, right? That's not even a coding thing. That's business knowledge. But also it's a person thinking and having the ability to create actual discrete requirements that say what I want and what I don't want. And so when you're dealing with agents, and it's always funny, people put into these prompts, I see this all the time, they go, and make no mistakes.
Yeah.
And somebody asked the other day, they asked, I forget if it was Sam Altman or whoever the Claude guy is. Nobody knows his name. But they said, does make no mistakes actually work?
Are you talking about the Anthropic guy?
Yeah.
Well, that's not Sam Altman is OpenAI, and
Yeah, but nobody knows the Sam Altman of Anthropic.
Yes, they do. It's that guy that wears the those fancy cardigans. He wears that nice shawl.
But nobody knows his name. You got to
Dario.
Google it. They didn't ask him. They referred to one of them and said, does this work? But so I give it guardrails. I say, you cannot just go off on your own and break anything that's already been built. You can't regress anything. And there's certain things you could put in place to say, you can't do these things, but you can do these things. And you're going to do them in accordance with our reference documents, our reference stack, our naming conventions, all of the things that you would do with a normal software development team. And then you do a code review. And if they make a mistake, you give them the feedback and you add that into the rules for the future, because they don't have a memory. And that's probably the biggest problem right now is they start, it's almost like Groundhog Day. They start every day going, all right, what do you want me to do? And so without a little bit of memory, they aren't very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Something I've been doing with some of my agents, specifically Ojo, who's doing some copywriting. I always, before I start another session, I go review your knowledge documents, review your tone of voice, and any reference material, and then let's talk. And I kind of just have to bring them up to date, I feel sometimes. But I also think the going back to the original question of use code. If it's deterministic, use code. If it's not, then you can use an agent. I also think a lot of how people work, maybe not developers, but your everyday person works right now, they're looking for decision making, but they're looking for that brain almost within their workflow. And I think people have come to expect it, especially coming off of the click to code solutions or all these SaaS products that I think have started to train people to want more out of their solutions. And so I think that is a huge benefit with agentic work, because it just operates so differently, and you can ask those questions openly or give and get feedback in native normal language. And to me, that's a huge benefit over code. For someone who's a business owner or a founder who is looking to build a brand that is technology first, what would you say to them if the pressure to become also AI first is heavy, or the pressure to pull agents into all of their business processes feels heavy? Do you think that's a pressure they should be listening to, or how do they maybe slow down and adjust to their business needs?
I think that ultimately that they need to have knowledge of where those things are in their business that can be automated in whatever way. So if they can't get somebody to answer the phone because they cannot hire a receptionist, and every single call goes unanswered and it goes to voicemail, and then their voicemail ends up being full, and they're not getting back to customers, then maybe they should implement a voice answering agent. I don't like them. I think it's a terrible experience, and I always just keep saying human, human. But they can be helpful with saying, hey, my refrigerator is broken and I need somebody to come out and look at it. And then it just sends a text to the person or whatever. But they need to find those places where there is an opportunity to augment or to, in some cases, and I say replace, you could, if the agent was so good, you could replace the receptionist with an agent and then have the receptionist do something more value added, whether it's, they're going to get into sending out marketing or calling and following up with customers they haven't talked to in a long time. So, which I think would be a terrible thing for an agent to do. And so there's a lot of that where it's possible. And you could say, okay, I'm going to start using agents, and the software, the big two, Google and Microsoft, they're shoving it down your throat anyway. Copilot is built into Office 365, and Google now, I don't even know if you Google anything anymore. I think you Gemini it. It's built into everything, and so you're giving people a taste of it, and you're letting people see. But for them to say, well, where can I impact my business? They have to find things where there's an opportunity, and that's doing either a work study and finding out that somebody spends half their day retyping a document that they could put into OCR, scan it, put it into OCR, and then have an agent summarize it. So that's ultimately my belief in it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said you can't solve problems that you don't have, and you can't automate processes that you don't have. So if you are a founder and you're just starting a business, then I would say start keeping a list of the things that you start doing repetitively, or the problems that you have, or like Jeff just said, if there's a place in the business where you're not going to be able to afford to hire a person. Now, would I say, oh, you're starting a business, go get a phone agent if you're not planning on hiring a receptionist? No. Wait till you get a couple phone calls so you know what people are calling about. If people are calling to schedule an appointment, then yeah, that's a really good use case. Maybe you get the voice agent, and the voice agent is simply there to schedule appointments. And that's a problem that you could solve, and a process that you could document in a way that you can solve it. But yeah, I think you need to look at your business and look at the problems that are taking up time or costing money or creating friction, and solve those. And you don't have to solve the biggest problem. You could solve the small problems that occur frequently in a high volume. So the place to get the most bang for your buck is to go automate a small problem that happens multiple times per day or per week.
I think also it's a good time for business owners and founders to take a look at their business and go, what makes us unique? And I say this because some of what's going to happen, especially as more businesses and companies and startups are adopting agentic work and making operations smoother, and companies that may have not been able to have smooth operations before all of a sudden can. What's going to shake out is the ability of that, just the human variation that businesses have, right? And those human relationships and elements and touches, those are going to become what's the defining factor, I think, in a lot of these businesses, specifically in service-based. And I also actually now think software, because a lot of the software will probably become to even look very similar. But what people are going to be paying for or want to be a part of is going to be the human that has made the variation, or the relationship, or an element that's a little bit different. And so if you're taking a look at your business and going, okay, what can I use an agent for here, like a reception example or an intern example, or maybe something on the back end, like building software, what's not going to take away from that uniqueness that is going to set apart your business from many others that are either going to be coming online here in the near future, especially software, or what already exists in the marketplace. I believe Dario even talked about this in the Bloomberg interview he just did. He talked about the moat audit, right? Writing down your competitive advantage, because Those are considered moats, and everyone's going to start to soon have very similar advantages. So you really need to find what's your unique variation, and it's probably going to be very different than what it ever was before, what it was even a year ago, but definitely what it was 5 years ago. And then not automating that to an agent or giving that to an agent, because that's what's going to make you really unique. I know that's very specific to a business owner or founder, but a lot of what we do at Port and Starboard is working with businesses that want to have a competitive advantage with technology, but not remove their uniqueness either by just implementing a whole bunch of technology. So that was went all over the place with agentic workflow, but I think we stayed mostly on topic. Jeff, Lisa, do you have any final words about the landscape of agentic workflows or relying on AI within those workflows?
The one last thing that I have, and I don't know if anybody saw it, but yesterday, Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, there was an interview with him. I think it might have been an hour. I don't know. It was fascinating, but he went ballistic on OpenAI and Anthropic. He basically said that all these companies, all the Fortune 500 companies in the country, they're paying for tokens that create no value. And he asked this hypothetical question. He says, if it was so valuable, and I told you I could give you something that would make you $1 billion, but I want 30% of your revenues, then why are they charging for the tokens if they're so valuable? Why didn't OpenAI just go to Ford and say, hey, give us 5% of any of the incremental gains you get by using our solutions? But the main thing that he said was that we're all giving, in some way, our intellectual property to those AI labs and teaching those models how to replace. So everybody's afraid of the AI replacing the employee. We're all giving everything to these LLMs, and they say, oh, we're not going to train on it. I'm sure they're not. Absolutely, 100%, they're not going to. Yeah, we don't know. And so if they're training on it, then they're learning about every single aspect of your business, and you're paying to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Super fascinating.
Well, it's a fascinating quote from Alex Karp, because I believe I'm giving him my face for facial recognition for free by walking down the street of my town as well.
Well, to bring this back to the original topic, what I will say to end this is there is still a concept of the right tool for the job. All technology is a tool. So, software applications are a tool, agents are a tool, and the point here is to choose the right tool for the job and for however long you need the job done, how repetitive the job is. And so in the long term, if you're using a software solution that has some point and click workflow triggers, and you can find a clean way to implement those in your business and easily maintain them and not be utilizing tokens because you're already paying for that as part of a solution you already have, then I would say don't upgrade that solution so you can get access to the API so that you can start using an agent to do something that you can do inside of there. There are, infinite ways to do things. There's always, the most efficient, the most effective, the most scalable way to do things. It might not always be the fastest way to do it right out of the gate. So, everything is going to continue to evolve. So it could be you do something with an agent for 3 weeks and then you migrate it to another solution to scale it, or kind of say, this is what it is. We're going to keep it status quo now for 6 years. We're going to build a little application. It's going to run until we need to mess with it again. So just think about whether you're choosing the right tool for the job that you need that tool to do.
Mm-hmm.
The example somebody gave the other day was, I can unscrew the handles from my kitchen cabinets with a knife, but that doesn't mean if I need to replace them all, I'm going to use a knife for that. If I don't have a screwdriver, I'm going to go get one if I need to replace all the handles on all my kitchen cabinets. If I need to replace one, then I might just use the knife.
We love to talk technology and business. Learn more about Port and Starboard or connect with us in the show notes. Fair winds until next time.